What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and normally I don't cover kind of overtly political topics on this channel. I do that over on Midwestly, but because this crosses over into social media and crosses over into censorship and crosses over into Silicon Valley, this is a quartering topic. It's also a topic that needs more eyeballs. So I hope that if you enjoy this video, that you'll leave a like on it and then you'll consider sharing it. So yesterday, Twitter put a fact check on one of President Trump's tweets, and he has since launched a full-scale attack on companies and social media over their bias, and I love it. I love it. I hope he continues. I hope he appoints a whole council on it, and I hope they look at obvious bias. I mean, we've seen so many times before where these social media platforms basically profit off dividing people, or they profit off how they keep their own opinions. You know, they keep the money coming in. And in this morning, it looks like we've got a spicy case. You know, and Tim Pool covered yesterday. You know, I told y'all Facebook is driving the polarization, and it is what ended journalism in this country. Facebook reportedly had evidence its algorithms were dividing people, but top executives ended or weakened proposed solutions. Facebook's initial research found that it encouraged polarization, but Mark Zuckerberg and other top executives rejected ideas amid fixing the problem. One report concluded that Facebook's algorithms exploit the human brain's attention to divisiveness, according to the journal. But Zuckerberg and Facebook's policy chief, Joe Kaplan, repeatedly nixed proposal solutions because they feared appearing biased against conservatives or simply lost interest in solving the problem. Facebook has come under increasing pressure to address toxic content and the polarization on its platform during everything going on right now. You know, Facebook profits off division. Ultimately, many efforts weren't incorporated in Facebook's products, with managers telling employees in September 2018 that the company was pivoting away societal good to individual value, according to the journal. We learned a lot since 2016, and we're not the same company, a Facebook spokeswoman told the paper. We've built a robust integrity system, strengthened our policies and practices to limit bad content, and used research to understand the platform's impact on society. Well, interestingly enough, today, Trump goes after Twitter, threatens to shut social media sites down. Yikes. Now, I don't know. You see, President Trump blasts Twitter after platform disputed the accuracy of two of his tweets. You also see him retweeting, who's this John Solomon guy? I don't know. Award-winning investigative journalist. Notice he also retweeted an article about YouTube, who was exposed yesterday as censoring some Chinese content, anti-Chinese government content, only to say later in the day that oopsie doopsie poopsie, it was just a mistake. You can see just going off, sharing articles that talk about, you know, social media bias, different types of different reports that make YouTube, make Twitter look bad, and he has every right to do so. Here's the Washington Post. Trump lashes out social media companies after Twitter labels two of his tweets with fact checks. President Trump took to Twitter early Wednesday to rail against social media companies, escalating a new battle with Twitter over using a fact check label on his tweets for the first time this week. Republicans feel that social media platforms totally silence conservative voices, Trump tweeted. We will strongly regulate or close them down before we can ever allow this to happen. We saw what they attempted to do and failed in 2016. We can't let more sophisticated version of that happen again. He threatened in a later tweet regarding Twitter that there's big action to follow. I love it. I hate that it took Trump having it affect him personally. This has been something that really has only been pushed forward by Ted Cruz and a few other small people in a small number of people, in the government. And now that Trump is involved, I'm hoping that he'll follow through on this. Now, I don't think it's impossible to have a voice on social media if you're a conservative, but I do think you have to live by a completely different set of standards. Just ask James Woods. You have to be extra careful. you also have to succeed in spite of yourself because of things like shadow banning. My account, and I'm not even a conservative, has been shadow banned several times. Certainly, there are many conservatives that are shadow banned, and people like Kathy Griffin, totally fine. The president's response came after Twitter on Tuesday slapped a fact-check label on the President Trump's tweets for the first time in response to a long-standing criticism that the company is too hands-off when it comes to policing misinformation and falsehoods from world leaders. The move, which escalates tension between Washington and Silicon Valley in an election year, was made in response to 2 Trump tweets made in the past 24 hours. The tweets falsely claimed the mail-in ballots are fraudulent. Twitter label says, "Get the facts about mail-in ballots," and redirects users to news article about Trump's unsubstantiated claim. The tweet, what? First of all, the idea that mail-in ballots are more secure than in person is insanity. Of course they're not. The tweets, the Twitter spokesperson, Katie Rosborough, contained potentially misleading information about the voting process and has been labeled to provide additional context. This is truly unprecedented. It's essentially, are you going to apply this to, let's say, not world leaders, but I don't know, journalists with 1 million followers? Are you going to apply this label to CNN, MSNBC when they're spreading fake news? I don't think so. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Look, if you want to have this kind of thing in place, it's got to apply to everyone and it's got to apply evenly. You can't pick and choose who gets it. The label directs users to an article by, guess what? CNN, The Washington Post, and The Hill, along with selections from articles and a page summarizing their findings of fact checkers. Twitter's actions come at a moment when Silicon Valleys are trying to show that they are prepared to tackle bad behavior ahead of a consequential presidential elections, but they also play into Trump's election year agenda, in which he's already started railing against alleged bias on social media companies. It's not alleged. It's obvious. I mean, it's forward. It's obvious to anyone who looks at it. Now, you could argue that these companies are private entities and they can do what they want. Okay, fine. Then remove their government protections. Remove their monies, their tax breaks, all the stuff that they get, protecting them as a platform, then remove them and let them be as biased as they want. We'll see how long they last. Last year, congressional committees held hearings on the subject, and Trump has hosted Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey at the White House to complain that he was losing followers. He currently has 80.3 million. The Department of Justice is also investigating some tech giants over potential abuses of market power. The Wall Street Journal last week said that Trump was considering creating a White House panel that would examine complaints of bias against conservatives on social media and other online platforms. Absolutely do this, but don't make it just about conservatives. If there's an obvious bias, great. But if you label it that, we're only going to worry about conservatives, then you're not going to get as much backing. There are a lot of people out there who feel like their ideas are being silenced unfairly on social media for not having the right opinions that don't identify as conservative. They will rally behind this, but I think you get a further, more important reach if you make this about just any bias whatsoever. Self-serving, for example. Trump and his surrogates have some of the most popular accounts on social media, but frequently protest that social media companies censor their voices. The reality is far more complicated. Twitter has been cracking down on spam accounts far more aggressively in recent years, a move that has impacted liberals and conservatives alike. And I agree that it likely does. It likely does impact both sides, like I just said. However, I think that any person who's just being honest about it, let's take the label of liberal or conservative off of this. If you don't have or share mainstream, which just happens to be liberal, if you don't carry mainstream opinions, then you are likely silenced. We see this on YouTube. YouTubers like Styx Hexenhammer is constantly buried. We see how YouTube buries independent content creators like myself against, Entertainment Weekly and CNN and MSNBC, who have been busted several times fabricating stories I've never had that happen. I've gotten stories wrong, but I haven't knowingly produced something false. But most mainstream media outlets have. Yet they continue to outrank independent content creators. Why? Because of bias. While leadership and rank and file of tech companies tends to lean liberal, no, it is. It doesn't tend. Dorsey himself is a proponent of left-leaning causes such as BLM. Silicon Valley leaders also believe that the platform should not intervene too strongly in content decisions, lest they risk losing a legal status that protects them from being held responsible for bad content on their websites. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. You need to hold this council. It needs to be bipartisan. And you need to tell these social media people that if they find out that you are meddling and applying bias, then you will lose these protections. That legitimate threat alone, I bet you'd see a big change in the platforms. I bet you would. And then I want to see a good, clean investigation. You know, I don't want to see self-fulfilling prophecies. The people need to see the evidence behind it, the data, the statistics. And because I don't want, the White House counsel to just say, yep, we found it, and then not prove it to anybody, because that won't look good either, because it wouldn't be good. You need to actually provide evidence. I, for one, believe that evidence exists, that non-mainstream voices, clearly, mainstream approved voices are in fact shadow banned and placed under a strict bias. That's what I believe. I think the data will bear it out, and that's what I think we need as American people who agree to continue to protect these platforms. Trump on Wednesday again tweeted his claims about mail-in ballots. Just like we can't let large mail-in ballots take root in our country, it would be a free-for-all on cheating, forgery, and theft of ballots. Whoever cheated the most would win. Likewise, social media, clean up your act now. This statement is not untrue. I mean, what do you mean? Of course the statement is true. You could have, first of all, it would be very easy. For example, my wife isn't really politically motivated. She doesn't want to go out and vote. But, if a mail-in ballot came home and then I could just say, hey, sign your name here. I mean, how many people would be doing that? It's ridiculous. Does there need to be a different, am I willing to consider new options for voting? Absolutely. If there's a way to, really provide at least the same level of fraud protection that exists now, doing it remotely, I'm cool with that. Mail-in ballots, not possible. It's rife for abuse. And of course it would be. So the idea that Twitter would be trying to strike these things down is absurd. It's a much larger rival. Facebook launched a fact-checking program several years ago. Facebook funds funds a large group of third-party fact-checkers to investigate content, which gets labeled on the site and demoted in its reach. However, Trump posted the same content about mail-in ballots on Facebook. Facebook said it didn't plan to label or remove the post. We believe that people should be able to have a robust debate about the electoral process, which is why we've crafted our policies to focus on misrepresentation. You know why Facebook's worried? Because they sat up there on trial. This is kind of funny. Twitter has 330 million users compared to Facebook's 2.6 billion. I didn't think Facebook was that much bigger. I pretty much thought, hey, who uses Facebook anymore? I mean, I use it to reach an audience, but I don't know how much I'd use it every single day. This is actually a very good thing for anybody who, regardless of the side of the aisle that you find yourself on or think you're on, you should support this kind of investigation. You should support the removal of bias on the platform so you're getting the correct information. And you should support the removal of any protections that they're getting under our government if they're found to be participating in this. Get them. Go get them, Trump. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.